Three men. What were they? Who knows what they are? Three different... Secretary, servant, and Panditji, Sanskrit editor, which was, for much of the time, was Pradyumna. Prabhupada called Pradyumna Panditji. One time sitting next to me, he called him Banditji. Do you know what a bandit is? In England, a bandit is, he's a criminal, he's a thief, bandit, so we called him Banditji, as a joke, because Pradyumna, he would, like I mentioned in class the other day, Vishal, a class about Vishal, Pradyumna had two bags crisscrossed across his body, and in both bags he would have Sanskrit books. He's still collecting Sanskrit books, Pradyumna. I saw him some years ago in New York City. He has a room there, Radhanath Swami, the temple there, I think it was called the Sanctuary, they still call, but he was bringing in another bookshelf to keep books. So anyway, I was thinking maybe we could start out, since this is kind of a special group altogether, especially since you're all book distributors. You all read Prabhupada's books too, yes? Is that too loud, do you think? It keeps some feedback is there. So what do you travel in?
We have a bus.
Oh. One bus, big bus.
One bus, and then we have a car also.
Okay.
So when we travel now, some devotees go in train.
And what books do you distribute?
Bhagavad Gita mostly. Bhagavad Gita and Krishna mostly.
Okay. So anyway, I was specifically servant. Sometimes I did little secretarial work, even typing letters. And a few times I typed the transcriptions of Chaitanya Charitamrita. That's better. When Prabhupada was doing Chaitanya Charitamrita, so I was transcribing, all the translation he was doing, the book work he was doing, he would just speak into a dictaphone machine. At that time, didn't have all the facilities now, so it was a very specific machine. If you go into Prabhupada's room here, as soon as you go in, if you look to the left, you'll see dictaphone machine, just like that. It was a dictaphone machine. So in the middle of the night, what for us was middle of the night, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, he would be holding that microphone. And it had a little rewind, record, play, like that. And I would be just next to him. As servant, my service was 24 hours a day to be within the sound of a bell. Prabhupada's bell on his desk, which again was just like an Artik bell. Wasn't buzzer, no text, none of these things were there then. So he would ring the bell, and when he rang the bell, meant the servant went in. And then he would say, do this, do that, get this person, get that person, get my secretary, but it was always the servant. So my service was very specifically answer the bell. When I joined 1971, actually this year in April, 2 months, right? April, 2 months, just almost 2 months to the day. April 22nd was the first time I saw devotees. And I was looking for Krishna. I didn't know I was looking for Krishna, but I was looking for Krishna. But I wanted to know God. I was 19 years old. Anyone here 19 years old? You're all older, huh? All in your 20s? Yeah, okay. 18. Okay, so all about that age. So I was in college. I was raised Catholic, Roman Catholic boy, like they have there in South India, all the Catholics, Roman Catholics. So I was raised in Catholic religion, And in Catholic religion, we were taught God was a person. And we had a book, it was called Catechism. And in the book, one of the very first things it says was that we were made in the image and likeness of God. So that meant it was personal. And Catholic religion ultimately is personal religion. And because they also talk about the three aspects of God. They talk God the Father, God the Son, and the third one was the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit, right? So God the Father, of course, that was Krishna. But they didn't know that. They said God was a person. There was God the Father. But when you opened up this book, this little catechism book, when we were young in grade school, they would just have, sometimes there would be a picture, like someone sitting in a big chair, kind of like the Lincoln Memorial. If you know, in the USA, Lincoln Memorial, a big thing of Lincoln sitting in the chair. But the face was blank because they didn't know what God looked like. This is what happened. So they would just have like a zero, just no face. But they said God was a person. So that was God the Father. God the Son, that was easy. He was the Guru. That was Jesus. And they misunderstood what it meant, God the Son, because they said the only way to the Father was through the Son. We say the same thing. The only way to reach Krishna is through the spiritual master. But they became Ritvik. Only spiritual master was Jesus. So he was the only way to get to God was through Jesus. Where we say the spiritual master is one. Yeah? So many spiritual but they're all one because they all have the same message. So it shows there was this understanding that came down literally from Vedic scriptures. But then because there's no proper guru, one connected in disciplic succession, everything gets misinterpreted, misunderstood, gets lost. So they would, Christians, you see, if you see here, maybe in this country you don't see so much. When we preach in America, Christians very heavy. No, only Jesus. You can only know God through Jesus. You guys are all demons, you know. You have this other teachers. There's no other teacher but Jesus. But we actually say the same thing. The Guru is one. You have to approach the Guru. So that's God the Son. He's the Guru. Then God the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit, they understand that. That's God within the heart. Of course, they misunderstand all of that too because they think he's only in the heart of humans. And all the other animals, everything, plants, animals, birds, bees, they have no soul. So that's a big misunderstanding. And in that way, they're allowed, of course, to kill anything because there's no soul. That's their justification. So some things were there. For me, it was a basis. So I was 19 years old. I was in college. It was also a Catholic college. And something happened in my head. I just became miserable one day. Everything was going along. I had a scholarship in college. I used to go to school on a motorcycle. I had a little Honda motorcycle back then. I had a girlfriend, but I couldn't understand, you know. As soon as you were with a girl, they'd tell you they loved you, and I thought, what do you know? I don't know what love. I didn't know what love is, but right away they want to, you know. And as soon as they said that, I'd get scared away because I didn't understand love. And I was in school, and all of a sudden, I just became bewildered and morose, depressed. And I did the only thing I knew what to do. I started praying. And I'm praying to a God who I didn't even know if he was there, if he was listening, if there was one. I started reading the Bible, but I had no teacher. So I would just open up this book and start reading things, and I didn't understand anything. I remember pages and pages of, just like in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, you know, when you read the first chapter, you can get bogged down in the first, this one's descended from this one, descended from this one. So that's what the Bible was like where I was reading, and I thought, there wasn't anything there that could help me. And I would go to bed and pray, if you're there, do something. I need something. And I started going to, they were called Christian revival meetings, just like we're having a meeting. They have their church, especially in the south of the USA. Pentecostals, they were called. So they would have like their own style of kirtan. Many of them were black. Black's very emotional, The whites not so much. But the blacks, they would sing and dance. I mean, they would have kirtan, and they have tambourines and be dancing, and some of them would go really, really wild, And they would even speak, they said, speak in tongues. So speaking in tongues was something, they would say things, but it wasn't English, didn't know what it was. So they figured it was like right from the spiritual world, right from heaven, coming, and they would just say all this stuff. So I wanted that experience. I didn't want to know there was God. I didn't care about philosophy. I wanted to go right to the end. I wanted to have an experience with God. I wanted to feel Him. So I started going to those, and I'm watching all these people dancing around and doing, but I didn't feel anything. I couldn't get the experience. So then I became more upset, more depressed. And in the Catholics, they had rosary beads. Rosary beads are like japa beads, but they chanted their Radha, Mary. They chanted Mother Mary, who had virgin birth of Jesus. All these things were taken from the Vedas, from Krishna's life, So you would chant these prayers. That didn't work. I was literally to the point I was crying. When I would go to bed, I felt so lost. And I just didn't know what to do. Didn't reach to the point of being suicidal. I never thought like that, but I just thought, what's the point of anything in this world? I didn't know what's the use. I was 19 years old. I had everything. Wasn't wealthy or anything, but I had everything a 19-year-old could want, And none of it made me happy. So I thought something's wrong. So it was April 22nd. April 22nd, I know, because that's Earth Day. 1970 in the US was the first Earth Day. Now we call like the green movement, everything's about global warming and all this. Well, this was way back there in 1970. So this was 1971, so it was the first anniversary of Earth Day. And a friend who I just met in the college a month or so before, we became best friends. I didn't know until later on why we became best friends. It was all Krishna's arrangement. Because him and I were at a park, big park in Philadelphia. That's where I'm from, city of Philadelphia, just south of New York City. Big city, 5 million people at the time. And we were at a park, and since it was Earth Day, there was a concert going on, local bands, rock bands and all. So, we went there, and we were a little buzzed. We were smoking marijuana back then. Everybody did back then. And lo and behold, we were up in a hill, and there was this place, it's called Belmont Plateau, and there's 12 people, and they're all wearing yellow robes. The women had yellow saris on, the men had yellow dhotis and kurtas, because there were no Indian stores, there were no temple stores. So these were Hare Krishnas, and they had nice bright tilak, which wasn't chandan, It was called Fuller's Earth. It was literally a paste that you would buy at the hardware store. Just a white, very white like your bead bag, white, pure white. And you would put it on, and it was almost like plaster. like you would put on the walls. So you could put it on at 4 in the morning, and 10 o'clock at night it would still be there, you know? So they had that, the men and the women. And the men, you know, they would shave their head every day back in those days. Every day, so bright, shiny heads, you know, the men, and some mridungas and kartals, and they're chanting Hare Krishna. And me and my friend are up on the hill, and he's there, let's go see them. And I'm like, no way. I was a little high, you know, I'm thinking, no, these people are from Mars or something. I don't, you know, who these people are. And anyway, kept saying, come on. It was like 3 times. He said, come on, they're okay, you know, let's go see. He had already was familiar with them, but he never said anything to me. He was also a searcher. He was philosophical, that we would read all these different books and all. Nothing I ever did. So he convinced me, and we went down. Daiva Shakti was there. Have you seen Daiva Shakti in the temple?
Yes.
Yeah, she gives some of our best class. She's been in Vrindavan since 1974. And she's like an encyclopedia, you know, of Vedic knowledge. She was the wife of the temple president. His name was Nayana Brahm. I didn't know any of these things. Anyway, he convinced me to go down. And I ran into one of these devotee people, and I started asking questions. And it was 1971, so Krishna book had just come out, the first volume of Krishna book, all about Krishna's boyhood pastimes, Kumara age, demons, and every question I had, he had an answer to. And from that very moment, we went to the temple every day after school. We'd go to school. I had my motorcycle. I'd meet him at school, and then we'd take the motorcycle to the temple, which was about 10 minutes away, and we'd attend Bhagavad Gita class and take prasadam. I didn't like prasadam. I thought sweet rice was sweet enough that your teeth would break, you know. And then they had upma, and I was like, ooh, like this gushy stuff with vegetables in it. I was Italian, raised Italian, pasta, pizza, lasagna, you know. Yogurt. You couldn't even buy yogurt in a store in those days. Only yogurt was in the temple. This soury, milky stuff, you know. So I wasn't one that came because of, many people come because of the prasadam. I was very different. I came because I believed everything they told me. So after 3 days, Kirtanananda Swami came to the temple. He was the new Vrindavan. He was Prabhupada's first disciple, one of the first sannyasi. Opened up the very first farm, New Vrindavan. So he came and he said, you both should come. We weren't living in the temple. We were just going for a few days. You should come to New Vrindavan. So that's what we did. We went to the temple every day for a week. And then we took a train. It's like you took a train here. We took a train. It was an 8-hour train ride from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, which was right near New Vrindavan. We moved into the temple. In those days, as soon as you moved into the temple, shaved your head, you put saffron on, you became instant brahmachari. So that's what we did. I started milking cows, chanting 16 rounds, everything. And I became the designated Krishna book reader. Everyone would have lunch and I would sit and read Krishna book. And then in the evening, and in this, there were only like 8 devotees, 10 devotees at this farm, Bahulaban farm. New Vrindavan had 4 or 5 different, just like here, had Madhuban, Bahulaban, Vrindavan. So all these, so this was the new farm, and it would become the main farm. And in the evening, Kirtanananda Swami would have me tell the story that I read at lunchtime. I couldn't read it. I would just, from memory, tell the story. So that was my beginning. And everything just changed just like that, just by chanting Hare Krishna and doing devotional service and meeting the devotees. I said in the class how in those days in the newspapers and TV, radio, they would say these Hare Krishnas are bright-faced. Because no one was bright-faced. Everyone was miserable in the material world. I was saying later on as a grahasta, I had a business from 83 to 2003, 20 years. My partner was my uncle. Sometimes I would go into his office and he'd say, "Why are you smiling? What are you so happy about?" Because he couldn't understand what's there, you're at work, all this stuff is why do you have a smile on your face? But the Hare Krishnas were known as bright-faced. As people just saw us out on the streets chanting all day long, right into the evening. And we would always be in the main parts of town, the downtown areas, the center cities, city centers, distributing BTGs and chanting. No one could understand, just like I didn't 2 weeks before. I didn't know who they were either, So that's how I joined. And then I was in New Vrindavan for 16 months. And Prabhupada came. And he didn't have a servant. His servant, anyway, one reason or another, his servant was no longer his servant. So he came to New Vrindavan. Kirtanananda Swami had two, we say, your right-hand man, and then have a left-hand man. We were like Kirtanananda's right and left hands, me and Kuladri, my godbrother. And the day before Prabhupada left New Vrindavan, I was the cook. I was the head cook, which meant I was the cook. Not like we had any other people. So I was in the kitchen from Mangal Artik until 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. And that year, 1970, and then this was 1972, Janmashtami time. So, August. Well, in May of 1972, we went across country. It was 5,000 kilometers in a van, just like you're traveling in a bus. 4 of us traveled in a van across country to see Prabhupada and to get Brahmin initiation. I had literally been in the temple for 1 year, so that meant you could get Brahmin initiation. So we drove across country, the 4 of us changing drivers, driving 12, 14 hours a day. And we get to New Dwarka, Los Angeles. And because I'm with Kirtanananda, I get to go on the morning walks. And I get to go into the garden in the afternoon. Prabhupada would sit in the garden. It's like smaller than this room. Privacy fence, 6 foot high fence around, 2 meter high. Whoops. And I became, in that garden, 5 or 6 devotees. I became the designated Krishna book reader. So again, Krishna book was there, and I would read. And it was when I first started to watch Prabhupada, and see how he did things. We were all watching him. But I guess we all have our natures and how we do things. And so I learned right away. I just had this Krishna book in my hands. And you didn't do anything without Prabhupada telling you to. Because he would sit there and trellis around him on asana. And we were all young, your age, young boys, 18, 19, 20. Sometimes he'd chant, or he'd just sit there and chant. And I was a nobody. Most of the people were book distributors, temple president, like that. But I knew Kirtanananda Swami, who was somebody. See, that's our goal. We're nobody, but you get in touch with somebody. Like Prabhupada would say, we become Krishna's dog. If you want to get to know somebody, You make friends with the dog, and the people, they like you very much. So Prabhupada would say, just like the Guru who had a pure devotee, he's Krishna's dog. So we become servants of those people. We become servants of the pure devotees. Then Krishna notices. We serve the pure devotee. One day Prabhupada, he was sitting, and he always sat very straight, Prabhupada. Always straight. Never slouched. And you'll see pictures in his room sometimes laying, but when he sat, it was always very straight. And we're sitting right there. And one time he's sitting and he looked at us. He said, Govindo Mari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. He said, we're proud to be Krishna's servants. That's why it's not a bad thing to say I was servant. That's our pride, he said. He said, everyone is servant. You serve your family, you serve your boss, you serve your country, you serve your dog, but everyone's serving. He said, but our pride, he says, is we're servants of Krishna. Govindo Mari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. And we're just like, you can imagine. We were right out of the material world. We were Westerners, we were malechas, knew nothing. But that was ecstatic. We went from not knowing anything about God to learning all about Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Imagine that feeling. Some of you may get that nowadays. Mostly when I was here with Prabhupada in the 70s, if you tried to speak to Indians, yes, I know Krishna, I know Shiva, I know Brahma, I know all these things. So preaching is not so easy. But in the West, we didn't know Shiva, we didn't know Brahma, we didn't know anything. We didn't even know God had a face or a name, or as Prabhupada said, an address. So that's what I learned one day. I learned God's name, His address, His mother's name, His father's name, His brother, sister's name, where He lived, what He did. Imagine, this is what Prabhupada gave us. Another time sitting up, and he looked 4 or 5 of us. He said, what color is Krishna? And I'm thinking, I was a new devotee, 1 year, aspiring devotee, and I thought, that's a funny question. And I'm realizing Prabhupada's a funny person. You can't trust him, Prabhupada. He's asking a very simple question. Why is he asking such a simple question? So I'm thinking, I knew right away, and I always knew when he was a trickster, Prabhupada. He would ask you a question, you could never get it right. Whatever you said was the wrong answer. So I'm just sitting there, I'm thinking, right? So then finally one god brother, he's a young brahmachari like me from somewhere else, I didn't even know him, he says it's described in Krishna book. He's blackish, like the monsoon cloud. So see, that was smart, because he's quoting Srimad Bhagavatam, he's quoting the Krishna book. Prabhupada looked at him. See, Prabhupada was tricky. He said he's blue, like the sky. He pointed to the sky. And then he said, first thing that helped me see Krishna. He said, the sky is blue because it's reflecting Krishna's bodily effulgence. It's a reflection of his body. That's why the sky is blue. Imagine. He made it that easy to see Krishna. That's our business. Not waiting for Krishna to come down in his threefold bending form, standing. No, you learn to see Krishna in everything. Because Krishna is everywhere. Everything is Krishna. And yet he's separate from everything, right? Everything is there in the philosophy. So now as soon as you look at the sky, you see Krishna. As So that was Prabhupada. And I'd just be sitting there, all these things. Each day we'd be in there for an hour or so. And he'd just give you these little tidbits of information on Krishna consciousness. And then sometimes he'd look at me and go, that meant? What did it mean? Read. I'm holding the Krishna book. I'm the designated reader. From the beginning, that was my service. You people, you're going to be distributing books the rest of your life. And then you go back to Godhead. If you're so fortunate, so determined, you have such good fortune. Me, I was reading Krishna book. He didn't know I was reading Krishna book. Or maybe he did know I was reading Krishna book and knew. So he would look at me. So I learned. Prabhupada, he didn't say, okay, now you can read Krishna book, read this chapter. No, he just looked at me and went. I opened up the book. And I started reading a story from Krishna book, which I was used to doing. It's one of the first things I did. And I was a pretty good reader. I couldn't pronounce many of the Sanskrit words very nicely. I would fumble over words. I'd freak out when I would see Kashira, Dakshai, Vishnu, Garbhada. Oh my God, you know. They were like, we would sweat. Karuna, Dakshai, Vishnu. They were difficult words we would fumble over. So we'd say, read. So I just started reading a story. Now there's just a half a dozen of us in this garden. Nice grass. We're sitting on the grass. Prabhupada's on his asana. Beautiful temperature, just like now, like springtime. Los Angeles is like springtime most of the year. And I was reading a story about a demon. It was the first chapter. A lot of demons are in there. And I got to this one point in the story. I don't even remember what story it was. But I started to say how Krishna was killing the demon. And when I said it, Prabhupada started laughing and laughing and laughing. And his whole body, he didn't stop, his whole body started shaking. He was laughing and laughing, and he started slapping his knee, called a knee slapper, they say in English. Something's very funny. And Prabhupada was slapping his knee, and tears are coming down from his eyes. I was just reading a Krishna book story. But Prabhupada was right there. So when he was laughing, everyone was laughing. We weren't laughing because of the story. We were laughing because of Prabhupada and how he was reacting to the story. This is where we want to go. And when I saw that, that was the first time I understood I'm in the right place. This is what I want. I want to be happy. And I saw that he was happy. Because when we joined, we were happy and we understood philosophically, but we were just working, always working. In New Vrindavan, Kirtanananda had a saying, we don't read Bhagavad Gita, we live Bhagavad Gita, which means you work. Yeah. We say the two kinds of devotees. You know, again, the English expression, you have bookworms and earthworms. So in ISKCON, they appreciate earthworms. Bookworms, they don't appreciate. You want to sit and read all day? No. You should read. What do you understand when you're reading? Do something practical. That's our philosophy. And Prabhupada would say that. Do something practical. So it was amazing. We were in ecstasy because Prabhupada was in ecstasy. And I thought, that's Krishna consciousness. Because that's what we say, right? Back to Godhead. Eternity, bliss, knowledge. But bliss has to be there. We have to be happy. So then the next day came. And again, once you start doing something, it becomes your service until something changes. You know, you immediately So I was the Krishna book reader. Not like the next day I gave the book to somebody else. No, it's what I did. And you didn't want to give it to somebody else. Who would want to let anybody else read? I was Prabhupada's reader. So I had a story, and I thought, I'm going to read this story today to Prabhupada. And of course it was going to be a story about a demon, because when I saw Prabhupada's reaction, I thought I have to read stories about demons every day, so he'll laugh, and then we can all laugh, we can all be happy. So I had one of my favorite Krishna book stories about a demon. I was 19 years old. They're all wonderful, huh? When you're young, young boy always likes blood, blood and guts. And so I knew immediately what story I would read. And I decided, who was I to think any of these things? But I decided when I read this line, Prabhupada's going to laugh just like he did yesterday. For some reason, I convinced myself I was going to read this story, I was going to say this line, and he was going to laugh exactly like he did yesterday. What story? Gorilla. No. David Gorilla. That was my favorite story. He was a big black gorilla, and he was very irreverent. What did he do? He went and passed urine, right? in the sacrifice, the Brahminical Jagya. He ran up there out of the bushes and he started peeing on it. So I thought that was hilarious. How irreverent can you be? Spoil the sacrifice. And I thought when I read this line, Prabhupada's going to laugh. I don't know why I thought it. So we get into the room, we sit down, and my heart's beating like fast, double time, because I'm anxious. And I'm sitting there. I have no idea that Prabhupada knows everything. And he knows what you're thinking. He can read your mind as easily as you can read your own mind. I didn't know that. I didn't think. We hear these things, that spiritual master knows everything. Or Prabhupada said, the spiritual master knows everything Krishna wants him to know. He said, no one can know everything. He said, only Krishna knows everything. He said, but the spiritual master can know everything Krishna wants him to know. So I'm sitting there, I'm all anxious, and I'm waiting. And I have the bookmarker in the Krishna book, at a little string in there, marked. So when he looks at me, I'll start reading. So I started reading, and I'm all excited and nervous, and I'm reading. I'm trying to just read. Yeah. And I came to the part, and I said it. And as soon as I said it, Prabhupada started laughing. and laughing, just like he did the day before. He was laughing and slapping his leg, and tears are coming down in his whole body. Prabhupada, when he laughed, there's different kinds of laughs, but his whole body, and Prabhupada had a belly, we say Brahmin belly, and he had Brahmin belly, Prabhupada. And he's laughing and slapping, and we're all in ecstasy. Everybody's laughing and laughing and laughing, because he was laughing. To us it was a wonderful story, but to him it was happening. It was going on. It was eternal pastime, and he was so happy. He said to me in the garden one day, he said, I like the Cowherd Boys very much. So then I finished the story. So then, who's the source of intelligence? It's not a trick question. Who's the source of forgetfulness? Right. So the next day I go in and I forgot to pick out my story with a demon in it, because that was my consciousness. I'm only going to read stories about demons and make Prabhupada laugh, and then we can all be in bliss together. But I went into the garden that day, I sat down, and I forgot to pick out a story. And as soon as we sat down, what happened? Prabhupada looked right at me. He said, read, because he knew I hadn't picked out my story. Prabhupada knew everything. So then what do? I start looking for a story with a demon. And he looked at me. He said, anywhere. He said, Krishna is like a sweet ball. Wherever you bite is sweet. So that was my next instruction. So then I read a story, but there was no demon, and he didn't laugh. But I got to see Prabhupada in that happiness, laughing, his sense of humor. And it's what I appreciated the most about Prabhupada. Everything he was doing so much, but Prabhupada was funny. And I liked that, to see the Krishna consciousness. Because we learned, what's one of the first things? Grave. The devotee's grave. He's silent. He's truthful. Where does it say he's funny? You don't find that in there. But Prabhupada was funny. And I liked that so much. Because I like that mood, happy. So we did that for a week. In the morning walk, one day he'd come back from the walk, and he'd walk up the stairs to his room, one flight of stairs. So he got to about the third step, and we're all just sitting there looking at this person. Just to be around him was just blow your mind. He's just a person from the spiritual world, and he's right here. And you could see it in him. His transcendental body was golden. Literally, his color was golden. Every day it got massaged with mustard oil, so it was very shiny, smooth and soft. And his eyes, they were always had tears, always wet, his eyes. Always like they had diamonds in them. You would look into his eyes. You see that compassion, that love. He's walking up the stairs, and he stopped right in front of me. He looked at me. He smiled. He said, Sutta Goswami. And he kept walking up the stairs. Because I was reading Krishna book. He could have said Sukadev Goswami, but for some reason he said Sutta Goswami. Then he just kept walking up the stairs. But he recognized me. I was reading, I was reciting Bhagavatam to him. Such good fortune. I wasn't his servant. I was just working, and that's when I became Brahmin. And then we went back to New Vrindavan. That's when I became the cook for Radha Vrindavan Chandra. Cooking. That's all I did. Cooked the milk sweets, cooked the lunch, cooked the breakfast. I cooked everything. So that was May. So now it's August. So this is the first time now. Prabhupada was there in 1970, but I wasn't there. So now 1972, he's in New Vrindavan for a week. And he's doing Bhagavad Sapta. He's doing Srimad Bhagavatam classes. We had our own Govardhan Hill in New Vrindavan. It was New Vrindavan, so we had everything. We had our Radha Kund, Govardhan Hill, wherever something fit, we named it. And that was Prabhupada's desire. So he would give classes up on the hill, which was far away from the temple. Was just a house, a farmhouse. There wasn't even water in this house, this temple, because it was a farmhouse in the country. So there was no running water. It was austere. We had a well outside the door, the main door. There was a well. So you got water from the well. So that's how we did things. Now I'm cooking in that kitchen. There wasn't electric stove or anything. We had wood stoves and all. So when Prabhupada was coming there, we all knew he was coming, but I thought I was going to get to associate with him again like I did in Los Angeles. But now there were 200 people, devotees from all over the U.S. that came to see Prabhupada, to take initiation, to hear his classes. But I was the cook. So I didn't get to go to any classes. I didn't get to go on any morning walks. There was no question of reading Krishna book. I was in the kitchen, cooking. There were other cooks, assistants that had come from other places. We had big fires outside. But the kitchen was a main place. Radhanath Swami, he was brahmachari then. He was my assistant. He was rolling chapatis. Bir Krishna Goswami, he was cutting vegetables. He'd come from Florida. Radhanath lived on the Vrindavan farm, which was up the hill. So I was disappointed. Here I am not getting any association of Prabhupada. So now I went from being very happy to not so happy. Just working hard. So then Prabhupada was there for a week or 10 days. And the day before he left, 8 o'clock at night, I'm in the kitchen preparing milk sweets. Kirtanananda came in, he had a cane, came in, and he looked at me. He said, "You want to be Prabhupada's servant?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay." He said, "Tomorrow morning, you'll go with him." I had no prior notice, no training, no anything. Like now, all you go Bhakti Shastra, Bhakti Vaibhava, you have initiation, disciple classes, we have GBC training classes, we have classes for everything. Then all we had was Bhagavatam class and Gita class, that was it. So I was going to become his servant. I didn't know anything. But I said yes. Who wouldn't say yes? Huh? So the next morning, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, we go to where Prabhupada's staying. It was a very small farmhouse, just one floor, ground floor place. We went into the room where Prabhupada would sit, his sitting room. It was dark. All of Prabhupada's rooms, it's 5 in the morning, so there's no sun. There's just a lamp on his desk. That's all he didn't have lights all around turned on. He would have Krishna's energy. Just had the one lamp for his translating work. So Kirtanananda and I go into the room, offer obeisances. We sit up. And of course I'm very, very nervous now. It wasn't like in the garden. I'm going to be Prabhupada's servant. He hardly knows who I am. He saw me. And Kirtananda said, "Prabhupada, this is Srutakirti. He's going to be your servant." And Prabhupada's sitting behind the desk. He goes, That was it. And then Kirtananda said, "He's a very good cook, but he doesn't know how to massage." Prabhupada said, "Anyone can massage," which wasn't true, I found out. Prabhupada was very particular about everything. But he said that anyway, just so I didn't get too frightened. I was already in total anxiety. So then he looked at me, and from under his desk, he grabbed his lota, which was under the desk, bell metal lota. We had heard about this lota when it was in Russia. You all know the story of the lota? We don't even have lotas anymore. India is so fallen, they don't even have bell metal lotas, nice brass buckets. Everything's plastic, plastic, plastic. Plastic toothbrush. Prabhupada used datum. You know datum? Twig. So this lota, when I joined in 1971, April, May, Prabhupada went to Russia with 2 devotees, Shyamasundar and Aravinda. And he stayed there for a week. And you may know or not know, back in those days, people would stand in line. We used to hear this all the time about Russia in the USA. That's how we criticize Russia. They have to stand in line for rice, have to stand in line for milk, have to stand in line for grains. And they did. So one day, they got milk, and they got rice, and they got sugar. So they brought it back to Prabhupada, staying in that hotel right by Red Square. And they said to Prabhupada, When Prabhupada said, you can make sweet rice. I did learn to enjoy sweet rice very quickly. It didn't take long. He said, you can make sweet rice. So they made a big batch of sweet rice. But they didn't have enough containers to put it in. So Prabhupada said, put it in the lota. It was a bathroom lota. Who would use that? Dirty lota. It was a spittoon. It was in the bathroom. So when I moved into the temple in New Vrindavan, this was one of the stories, because we always heard Prabhupada's stories back then. We lived on Prabhupada's stories. So they said they put it in the lota. I didn't know what a lota was. I knew it was some container, and I heard what it was for and everything. I had never seen one. And then I learned one of those lessons we learned early on. Time, place, and circumstance. You know that trilogy of words? Everything is adjusted according to time, place, and circumstances. So even though it was a muchi, lota, the sweet rice was stored in the lota. Time, place, and circumstance. And I heard that over and over. So now, Prabhupada reached under his desk and he grabbed the lota. It was the first time I saw it. That lota traveled all around the world with Prabhupada. It was his lota. And he got up and he gave me my very first instruction as his servant. What did he say? It's perfect instruction. 2 words, he said. He got up, started walking to the door. He said, follow me. That's what we do. So perfect, it's an eternal instruction from your spiritual master. That's all we ever do. We follow the spiritual master. So it's the first thing he said to me, follow me. I didn't even know what I was doing. I kind of knew. So we walked out the door. We walked about 10 meters. Prabhupada said, wait here. And then with his lota, he walked into the trees. After a couple minutes, he came back and handed me his lota. He said, wash it with the dirt, the soil. He said, bring it back under the desk. So it was my very first service. After my first instruction, follow me, my first service was cleaning his lota, his bathroom lota. So I understood what my business was. His personal servant, cleaning his bathroom, doing whatever he said. I was with him 2.5 years. I never had to clean that lota again. Used to get shined every day by the ladies when Prabhupada was on his morning walk. The ladies would come in and polish the silver, polish the lota, polish his cooker, put vases in, clean everything, fresh towels, fresh bed sheets. But that's what he made me do the first day. I saw it. He was training me as his servant. And then we left New Vrindavan that morning. I left behind my boots because it was a muddy place. It would rain. Here they don't have like a rainy season. There it could rain anytime. You're in the country. A lot of mud, snow. Winters were horrible there. So I traded in my boots for sandals and dhoti. We would just wear pants or jeans, denim, because we were on a farm working with the cows. So then we went 2 hours to Pittsburgh, and I'm a servant. The secretary told me, Shama Sundar, who's writing this book, The Rhinos, what's it called? Chasing the Rhinos, yeah. The real term was shooting the rhino. But they decided that wouldn't go over very well. Just like being a servant also, you can't say. Everybody introduces me, especially universities. Prabhupada's secretary. No one wants to be servant. Only us. We want to be servant. We don't even want to just be the servant. We want to be the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant. Because everything's upside down. So we get to Pittsburgh, and Shama Sundar says to me, so you're Prabhupada's servant. He said, so when Prabhupada rings the bell, you answer it. He said, when Prabhupada goes in the car, you sit next to him. Okay. He said, when Prabhupada's on the airplane, you sit next to him. He looked at me, he said, do you know how to use a tape recorder to record? Just like now, 10-year-olds know how to do everything, you know. Young, we know how to do the tape recorders and press the record and play and all that. So I said, yes. He said, on the morning walk, you record him whenever he speaks. So they were my 3 instructions that I knew. But I'm completely nervous. And I see him get a massage. There was somebody else to massage him that day, Sudama Maharaj. He had been Prabhupada's servant. And I'm watching, not taking any notes or anything. That was never one of my things, you know. But I'm watching and trying to say, oh, he's doing that, rubbing the back. And I'm just watching. I'm thinking, oh, God, you know. And I was scared. I had never touched any man's body, you know, like, ooh, you know. We say, and of course, Prabhupada wasn't a man. He wasn't a normal person. But I could never even imagine doing, so I didn't know what to do. But I'm watching him, and I'm thinking, oh, well, good, he's here, so he'll be massaging him. So he gave him the massage, and I'm watching him kind of, and then he offers a base and says, all right, Prabhupada, I'll be leaving now and going to Japan. And I'm thinking, oh, God. It's all on me now. But I still didn't really know what to do. I didn't know anything. And Prabhupada's in his sitting room, wherever he was, if there were enough. He had a sitting room, he had his bedroom, and his bathroom. You know, those 3 things. So he was in the sitting room. I was in the bedroom. There was no servant quarters or anything. So they said, you stay here for now. At night, I would sleep outside the door on the hall. But now I'm in the bedroom, and I'm looking in his suitcase, trying to figure out, you know, just familiarize myself. A couple dhotis, kurtas, chadars, bead bag, his cooker, which I didn't know anything what this cooker was for, but it looked like a little bomb in there, you know, a brass bomb. Nowadays, you could never fly with that thing in the suitcase. They would x-ray that and right, I would call you right in there. But that was in there. So I'm sitting in there looking at the suitcase, and I hear a bell ring. Prabhupada was ringing the bell right next door. So I knew right away. My intelligence, Krishna gave me the intelligence. I heard the bell, I jumped. I ran into the room. I offered obeisances. And Prabhupada's sitting right in front of me, just on a cushion on the floor. And desk in front, always the desk was in front of him. And I look up and I said, I didn't know what to say even. I'm just looking. I said, yes, Prabhupada. I said, what can I do? He looked at me. He said, nothing. I just wanted to see how fast you were. And he started laughing, and I started laughing. So just like that, he broke all my anxiety. The very first time he rang the bell, he reminded me of his sense of humor. Just wanted to see how fast you were. Make sure I would answer the bell. Otherwise, I had no use at all if I didn't answer the bell. Then if you had to keep ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. So then I'm still sitting there. I said, anything else? And he goes, no. I still don't know what I'm supposed to do. I said, should I leave? He said, okay. So then I went back. So that was my very first experience with the bell. So Prabhupada was expert. He knew, you're my servant. What good's a servant if he's always in anxiety, awe and reverence? This is what all of us were. We would see We didn't know how to talk in front of Prabhupada. When I went there to get my Brahmin initiation, we went into Prabhupada's room. Again, I was with Kirtanananda, myself, and Kuladri. And Prabhupada looked, nice brahmacharis, he would always say, you know, nice boys. And he looked at me, he said, what's your name? And Kirtanananda said, that's Srutakirti, Prabhupada. You couldn't think in his presence. Huh? But now I'm his servant. So he made me at ease, so I could do some service. So that was the beginning. But that's what you get. We get what we want. We have desire. We could go on and on and on, but I also have to do some other things, but we'll stop. I appreciate very much the service you're doing. It's not the easiest thing to do, but I'm sure you understand when you do it. You do austerity, that's how you experience ecstasy. You get nothing without austerity. Huh? Comfortable life, we say comfortable life and Krishna consciousness don't go hand in hand. If you want bliss, you've got to do something. And that's what it was like being with Prabhupada. It was very difficult. Traveling, we had no schedule. Prabhupada had a schedule, but keeping his schedule, our schedule was whatever we had to do to keep him in his schedule, which is difficult when you're not regulated. But that difficulty is what gave us our happiness, to be with Prabhupada. We just long for those days. That's okay. We long for those days just to be with him again and see him serve 24 hours a day. One day Prabhupada said to me, he was ready to take his little nap after lunch. So you were a servant, you were there, all these just intimate moments. He went and sat in the bed and I'm doing something, pulling the sheet down. He said, I hate sleep. He said, it's just a waste of time. He said, whenever I think I'm going to sleep, he said, now I think I'm just going to waste my time. And then right after he said it, he laid down and he put the sheet over his head very, very peacefully. You can't understand the mind of a pure devotee. There's so many things were there at the same time. Just like a child, so innocent. There was this innocence there. And yet, he was doing everything. But I appreciated that side. Not when he was doing his service to his spiritual master, following his orders fully, 24 hours a day. But I appreciated seeing him behind the door in his room. He was just a devotee of Krishna. He was a lover of Krishna. And he was childlike. Not childish. He was childlike. He was innocent, like a young boy. Said he liked the Cowherd Boys very much. He said that to me again 2 years later. I like the Cowherd Boys very much, he said. Okay, we'll stop here. How much longer are you here?
Till 28th Feb.
21st.
28th.
28th. So we can meet one more time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I have class Saturday, I have a class Sunday, Zoom class Sunday. Zoom class Saturday. Now we just Zoom. We don't go anywhere, but we're Zooming everywhere. Yeah. I have Russian class tomorrow, 500 people, which is the maximum, I think, on Zoom. There were 500 last week. So these devotees are everywhere because of Prabhupada. 1 week he spent in Russia, imagine. But he planted so many seeds just by walking around and chanting. That's the potency of pure devotee. Okay, time for 1 or 2 questions. Anybody have a question? Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji said that Lota, it is still there, Prabhuji. Mr. Prabhupada used to carry all over the world that Lota.
That Lota. You can see Lota in his room here. Many things you'll see there that we're with him. We have watches. My wife actually cleans the she's in charge of cleaning the cabinets in Prabhupada's rooms here. You'll see they're like, everything's spotless. The whole room is spotless, but so yeah, you can see many items, dhotis, kurtas, hairs from his head. I would shave his head with electric razor every couple of weeks. So that was personal servant. It's like pujari. I was pujari, but my deity was moving around. Pujari and personal servant, your business is the same. You cook for your deity, you dress him, you help him bathe, you do all these things. But Prabhupada never stayed still, so it was more exciting. Sometimes also the deity, they're known to move, but you've got to be very, very fortunate for your deity to pick up and move somewhere. Yeah. Yes?
Prabhuji, you mentioned that you were in search of Krishna. So, in what sense you were telling you were in search of God, you were in search of happiness, you were in search of love? I wanted
God. I had, an inkling of spirituality. And I guess it was something that was there in me, somehow or other. Prabhupada said, of course, he gave us our pious activities, he gave us our Agyata Sukriti, but he also said that they appeared in the West to help him in his mission. So somehow or other, I was fortunate in that misery that I turned to God. That's what we say, Yasha Prasada Bhagavat Prasada, We go to Krishna he gives you the spiritual master, and then the spiritual master gives you Krishna. So I literally prayed to Krishna. I didn't know I was praying for a spiritual master or a teacher. I wanted God to do something. But I also didn't know if God was there. But then he presented himself. And that was Prabhupada's mercy. His leaving Vrindavan to give Vrindavan. Now look at Vrindavan. It's crazy. Hey, hear these horns? We were so happy during the lockdown when nobody could come. All you heard were peacocks and parrots, but it was for a few months. But we weren't allowed in the temple either, so that was the hard part. But the fun part was there were no cars. What's the other thing? The rickshaws, no cars, no horns. So it was like the old days when I was here, But now Kumbh Mela is going on here. It's wild here. But that's also exciting. And it's all due to Prabhupada. Prabhupada brought all of this here. All this area was nothing but fields. Nothing was here. There were no shops, no temples. All these temples up and down Bhaktivedanta Swami Marg, none of it existed. He put Vrindavan for the whole world. So it has its downside. For us, we miss the sweetness of those days. But at the same time, just like you're going out preaching, it gives us preaching opportunities without even leaving Vrindavan. So hundreds and thousands of people to preach to, give books to, get them to chant japa, all these things are going on. He keep asking. Yes, go on. No.
We hear about finding faults with our God brothers, with our seniors, and with our... So, is there any instance, I'm sure there must be, where Prabhupada faces a situation about finding faults within his disciples?
Well, that's the business of Guru, is to find faults in his. See, that's a different situation. That's not criticism. He said the business of Guru is to chastise, to take the pride away, to instruct, so that you know what to do. That's why we need a spiritual master. Otherwise, without a Guru, you just do whatever you think. You can read, like he says, you can't become a doctor just by reading medical journals. You have to have a teacher. So the business of the teacher is to criticize, but that's a different kind of criticism. Amongst ourselves, we have to be very careful, finding fault. And that's not our business. Our business, Prabhupada also would find the good things in everyone and knew how to fan the flame to increase. That's a guru. So we should follow in that way, always trying to help everyone else, not climb over them. And that's what they say. You know, I become better by bringing you down. No, we become better by helping others rise. The very first offense, to blaspheme. The devotees have dedicated their lives. What does that mean? To blaspheme. It means to criticize them. Look it up. I just looked it up. The class I gave yesterday, I was going to discuss it. I never even got into it. It went, my class is always, I have one plan and something else happens. That's what I'm very spontaneous. But I looked it up. The opposite of blasphemy is reverence. Okay? So that's what we need to do. So it's the very first offense, is this criticism of others. So we can chant and chant and chant for lifetimes, but if all we do is criticize everyone we see, chanting won't get you anywhere. It'll take you, like I said, many lifetimes, hundreds, thousands, millions of lifetimes. So we have to learn, and that's pure devotee. Pure devotee sees everyone serving Krishna. That's pure devotee.